You're listening to Risk and Resolve, where leadership, business, and risk management collide. We bring you real conversations, sharp insights, and strategies for success. And now for your hosts, Ben, Conner, and Todd Hufford.
Welcome back to another episode of Risk and Resolve. I'm your host, Ben Conner, along with Todd Hufford. And today our special guest is Randy Otto, a Winston Churchill expert and keynote speaker. Randy is an internationally sought after keynote speaker and acclaimed actor known for his one-man portrayals of Winston Churchill spanning over 4 decades. He's a creator and performer of multiple original Churchill theatrical programs such as Winston Churchill CEO, Churchill The Blitz, Churchill Man of the Century, and Painting as a Pastime. Randy, thanks for joining us today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Ben. Hello, Todd.
Hello. How are you doing, Randy?
We're wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Well, Randy is even though he is South now, and I believe Savannah, Georgia, Randy grew up, or at least has lived, in the Midwest, attended the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire. So, Randy, just give us a little bit of your background before we get into, Churchill as a passion. What was life like for you in Wisconsin and growing up, and who is Randy Otto?
How much time do we have? Born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Father was a World War II veteran, fought in New Guinea. Mom was a Rosie Riveter. She made ammunition cases during the war. They met at a Milwaukee Brewers baseball game, and I was the result, one of the results anyway. I have one other brother. Born in 52, grew up in the idyllic 50s. Those of you who are listening who remember those days, it was a great time to grow up. We had a carefree existence. Mother kicked you out in the morning and you came back in time for dinner. And in the midst of it all, we played baseball, and not unlike probably any other child. But what changed things was when I was 12 years of age in 1965, early 65, my father called us all into the living room and sat us down, and he had the television tuned to the funeral of a man that I'd never really heard of, a man by the name of Winston Churchill. And I witnessed that day, my father, tears in his eyes. He kept saying over and over again, "This is the greatest man who ever lived. You must remember all of this." And we watched the whole thing. It was quite a spectacle. It was the largest state funeral for anyone not royalty that had ever been mounted. It was quite an event. Music, the rest of it. And I became enthralled with the name of Winston Churchill because of that. Really made an impression, as you can imagine, on a young boy. And I studied Churchill subliminally and formally, read things in the library. And so when I got to college at Eau Claire in the University of Wisconsin, as you mentioned earlier, I was primed. There was a British history professor who was also a Churchillian scholar who went to school at Eau Claire. Part of the reason I went to school there. And I showed up for class, and I met Dr. Max Schoenfeld. Dr. Schoenfeld was a diminutive man. He looked like Wally Cox. Wally Cox was a comedian back in the 60s. He was also the voice of Underdog. If you remember Underdog, there's no need to fear. Underdog is here. Remember him? Right, we all do. And he looked like that. He had big horn-rimmed glasses. But in class, this man did a spot-on Winston Churchill like you've never seen. I thought it was the most incongruously funny thing I'd ever seen in my life. Very knowledgeable person. I was soaking up everything about Churchill. But being a young acting student, I had him down. I was able to imitate him imitating Winston Churchill, and I was doing it in front of a group of students one day. I was killing it, stand-up comedy, and they stopped laughing, and I realized Dr. Schoenfeld was standing right behind me, and I turned to face the music, and he said words that have formed my life ever since. He said, Mr. Otto, you might have something there. Step into my office. And I met my great mentor, and much as we all have had a great mentor, right? And in our lives. Dr. Schoenfeld poured Winston Churchill into my brain, into my heart, and into my very soul, to the point to where I became pixelated, completely enthralled by Churchill. And I've been doing it now for the rest of my life, which was quite a long time ago. I think it's 5 decades now, to be honest with you, Ben. So that's a little bit about my formative years. I began performing as Churchill when I was, 20 years of age, 19 years of age, and I never looked back.
And that's been something that you've been doing ever since, but you also had a career alongside that, right?
I did acting about 4 or 5, almost 5 years of banging around different companies. Was a member of the Milwaukee Repertory Theater, a number of different companies, and successful. I mean, you look at this face, and this was a character actor. He wasn't a lead role kind of a guy, and loved the character acting. Very good at it, but it wasn't paying the bills. So my brother Bill was in the financial services industry, and fortunately I had a minor in economics to fall back on at Eau Claire, and so I had a bit of a financial background. He said, you might be good at this, and I have been managing wealth for clientele that I've built over the years ever since, and I still continue to do that today with Stifel. It's a brokerage firm out of St. Louis. Some of you may have heard of Stifel Nicholas or Stifel over the years, and that's been a joy to me. The client contact. The only problem with that is that my clients don't know who's managing their money, me or Winston Churchill.
A little bit of both, right?
A little bit.
It's you, because I think with what we know about Winston, he didn't have a lot to rub together after he passed away.
Well, no, he was actually pretty well off when he passed away. He left the money management to others. After World War II, it was a different story. He was almost bankrupt. They might have had to have sold everything they had just to cover debt. And fortunately, some angels came to the rescue. The National Historic Trust took over their estate, said they could live there until they had both passed away, he and his wife, which they did. It's in a place called Chartwell, which is just south of London. One of the most beautiful places on earth. Churchill chose it for its view, looking through the Weald of Kent down the valleys. It's really a lovely spot to visit if you ever get a chance when you're in London. But he published extensively. Won the Pulitzer Prize in 1951 for his 6-volume set, which you can see just right above my head there. Those red books, those are his war memoirs from World War II. Very successful, along with many other books and articles in the resume. He was a writer by trade. That's how he earned a living, and he was well thought of. Let's just put it that way. After World War II, quite a popular individual, had speaking engagements, the rest of it. So he did pretty well the rest of his life, Todd. But he struggled mightily because he also lived large.
Yeah.
He had
He's
an expense problem.
famous for that.
Can you tell us a little bit of what it's like as a journey in your journey of and you even mentioned of like your head, your heart, and your soul. I'm sure that was a journey too of when you are portraying somebody. You can know about somebody, but that doesn't necessarily translate into being able to turn into somebody, right? What was that like? What was that journey for you to take the passion of knowledge into the action in the imitation to really being able to transform into a character?
Well, that's a great question. When I finished up my acting career and took on the mantle of wealth manager, I became quite adept at visiting nursing homes, assisted living centers, senior centers, libraries, any place that would listen to me, because what I was trying to do was perfect my material, you see. And so I became that person that could speak for 20 minutes or a half an hour and portray Winston Churchill and be somewhat entertaining to that group. But what really made a difference was my audience. The audience was mainly those of the greatest generation, as they were called, World War II veterans and their spouses, who engaged me in conversation afterwards and would tell me about their lives and what they had gone through during this great conflagration and how they grew up, the question you just asked me. And so that became a foundation for me to not necessarily incorporate their stories, but it gave me a good foundation to work on, to realize who my audience was. And if you're going to do these things, you've got to understand your audience. So I formed my material and perfected it by speaking to the greatest generation for quite a few years, until my son came home from high school. And I named him Max after my great teacher, Dr. Max Schoenfeld.
Yeah, cool.
And he came home and said, "Dad, the kids all want to know. You might be able to see it right up on top, right here. You see my license plate. See, it says Winston. I know it's probably backwards, but
Yeah.
it says America's Dairyland Winston on it." And he said, "The kids all want to know, do you sell cigarettes or do you drive a race car?" They didn't. And I said, "Well, Max, I'm sure you told them all about Winston Churchill." He said he started to, but he had to admit, "Dad, I hate to tell you this, but nobody knew who Winston Churchill was." And when he pulled me up off the floor, the words of my great mentor came back to me. He said, "If you don't do this, Randy, they're going to forget about Winston Churchill." That was after he took me to see probably the greatest portrayer of a historical character. His name was Hal Holbrook. And for those of you who don't know who Hal Holbrook was, Hal was the quintessential Mark Twain. He portrayed Mark Twain for 64 years straight on stage and played to very large houses and audiences. And he was iconic to me. I had seen him perform. I aspired to be like him in that he could hold an audience in the palm of his hand. And so I saw red that day and called his internal. Her name is Joyce Cohen. And Joyce answered the phone, wondered where I got the phone number, said it didn't matter. I needed to see him. And because I'd been working on a script for so long, wanted it to be perfect. You know how it goes. You didn't want to do it until it was absolutely, completely proofed. And so she said, why don't you go to Southern Illinois University this weekend? I'll get you 4 tickets to see his show. So my 2 sons and my wife and I jumped in the family minivan and off we went. And after the show, they ate pizza in the parking lot, normal. And I went to the green room to meet this great man, this great actor, who I'd never met. And I was standing in line behind a velvet rope. He was seeing people one at a time when I heard from across the room, "You must be Mr. Churchill," in his Mark Twain voice. And I turned and said, "Mr. Twain, do you recall the night that we met? I believe it was December the 9th of 1900. And I started walking towards him, saw the glint in his eye. He and I were the only 2 who had read both of the diaries of the men. And they met at Churchill's inaugural speech in the United States in 1900. He was speaking in New York, and Twain wanted to interview him. And they both wrote about that interview, and we recreated that from thin air for about a half an hour. We went back and forth, had a marvelous time. Wish I had it in a bottle. And he had me go sit down afterwards. And he said, "Just wait and we'll talk afterwards." So he saw everyone, walked over to me and said, "Well, I guess we both know we can act. And what can I do for you?" And told him, poured my soul out to him. And he said, "Randy, you do not need a big script. All you need to do is tell the stories, which you know, obviously, but tell the stories, string them together with segues. There's a bridge between stories that needs to push the next story forward." It's the way he explained it to me. It was simple, but I realized that's all he had been doing on stage. And he said, if you do that, Randy, you'll be doing what I'm doing when you're my age. And he was about my age right now when I met him. And so my goal is to hopefully pass on these stories of this great man, and in the process, give people a sense of history. Churchill said that a nation that forgets its past has no future. And nothing is truer. It was true back in the 1940s, in the 1930s, in the 40s and 50s. It's true today, isn't it? That we must remember our past. Otherwise, we're doomed to repeat it, correct?
Is that the moment where it went from your head to your heart? Was that interaction? Where
It really,
like,
it was an aha,
Yeah.
your correct moment. It freed me from the shackles of a traditional actor having lines that you memorize and you perfect and you go through. I know many actors have to have a script that is precise, and those words need to be the way they are. But you see, when you are a solo performer, instead of having someone on stage to play off of, and what you have is you have the audience. The audience is the other person that you are on stage with, if you will. What you attempt to do is to bring them on stage with you, whether it be in a theatrical setting or whether it be in a keynote setting, as we met at Ben. So, bottom line is this: you've got to have a belief, first of all, from the audience, to where they suspend their disbelief. They don't see Randy Otto anymore. They simply see Winston Churchill and who's speaking to them. And if you'd like me to do the rest of this interview with Winston Churchill, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it.
Sure.
Randy, you mentioned the audience changing. They're not the only party in this conversation that changed. You changed. At the very least, you aged. Has it been easier to portray Winston Churchill, whom I would say most people think of as an older gentleman,
Mhm.
though he had quite the career as a younger gentleman. Most of what I think you portray would be post-war type conversations or during the war type conversations. Has it been more connective? Does the audience connect more when they see a gentleman who maybe reflects a closer age of the character he's representing?
You know, I've never had a problem. It's whether I was just in college or doing it today. It's because of what I believe. Um, I believe that I I am Winston Churchill, uh, and I owe that to the audience to become Winston and to transport them back to whatever time period I wanted. Um, I I can portray him as a little boy, even at this age, because if the words are correct, if those segues are right, and if the story is true, and it rings true to people that there is a similarity between, believe it or not, between Winston Churchill and their lives. Uh, he was as a young boy overcame various difficulties. He was dyslexic. He had a terrible lisp. He was last in his class because he was rather headstrong. I'm sure uh, he was ADHD and whatever. He was very hyperactive,
Yep.
And people can relate to that. And you can relate to him as a young man having a difficult time with his father. But you know, we put that against growing up in the Victorian age, and that was a little bit of a different time. And as you explain that to people, it sinks in that, hey, there was a time before automobiles, combustion engines. This guy grew up during that period of time. He rode a horse. He charged on the last great cavalry charge at embodiment in the Sudan, in Egypt, uh, many years ago, with a pistol and a sword. You know, and he fought on 4 battlefields. If you tell those stories, it really won't matter who 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 he is at that period of time. You can bring your audience in as long as you're true and you have a pretty good sense of how to carry yourself at any given age.
So
I can't be 18 years old anymore, obviously, but I can reflect back and with words, inflections, and and maybe some video on or a photograph on the wall. I can I can help people remember those times or experience those times uh, as a at whatever age I choose.
well, you just hit on something relating to the audience about remembering those times or experiencing those times, and that definitely has changed with the audience. So
Hmm.
you mentioned being born in 1952 in the early 20s. You started this part of your life. That's the early 1970s. In the early 70s, darn near every person in every audience you were in, every story you told was that they had a similar memory, and you were simply bringing that memory back to the forefront.
Right.
You fast forward to your audience today. Very few people, if any, have that same memory, at least in the way of experiencing it. So you're having to take them back and maybe experience it for the first time. How does your work change with an audience that doesn't have a personal memory and you're introducing some of this material to them for the first time?
I drill it into them, Todd. They have no choice but to experience that time. Um, in answer to that, I believe I stand when I'm on stage. I stand in a prism, and I stand there with people who are no longer with us, who got me to where I am today. My father, I bring him on stage with me. Dr. Schoenfeld, I bring him on stage. Hal Holbrook was as good as his word. He said, whenever you need help technically, call me. And I had his cell phone number, and I was able to call him when I ran into a roadblock, something similar to what you're talking about. All these things came to me. And then, of course, there's the Churchill family who have endorsed me. Jonathan Sands, his mother just passed away. I'm going to be in London at the end of March for her remembrance. I got very close to, he was the great grandson of Winston Churchill. He and I were dear friends. He passed away here a few years ago. You know, it's not me. It's those people that I give thanks to that were such a repository of knowledge, who helped me along the way and believed in what I was doing. That's really the key. It's true for any walk, anything, any career anyone has, anything people pursue. It's those people who got you, who believed in you, that pushed you forward, and as a result, when I stand in that prism on stage, it's not just me; it's all of us. The memories of everyone I've ever met who have believed in me on stages or on the platform, as Winston Churchill, I try to bring all of them with me. And that makes the difference, Todd. It's those that energy that came to me and continues to be exuded from an audience. It's what keeps me going. And I learn something new about Winston Churchill literally on a daily basis. There's so much being written about him. You know, the biography of Churchill is the longest biography of any human being who's ever lived. Did you know that? Yeah, it was recently completed at a place called Hillsdale College, which is located in southeastern Michigan. Yep. Dr. Larry Arnn, who is the boss there, yep, put that together, and I'm going to be seeing him in the first part of March. March the 5th is the 80th anniversary of a speech that Churchill gave. It's called the Iron Curtain speech. It was given in a place called Fulton, Missouri, where our National Churchill Museum is located. And they've asked me very kindly to keynote a good portion of that celebration this year. And Dr. Arnn is also going to be speaking there. So I'm looking forward to meeting him. He provided the funding. He and his cohorts provided the funding to finish that biography. And it's a lot of books. You go to Hillsdale, you can get a hold of the whole biography. I suggest you have another bookcase about the size of the one back here to hold it.
Randy, when you do what you've done for so many years, the line between Randy Otto and Winston Churchill begins to blur in some ways. I'm no actor, but I traveled in Germany about 25 years ago, and I had a little German in high school. And while I was there, I actually had a dream in German. I was speaking, and the people in my dream were speaking in German, and I understood it. Do you ever dream that you're Winston Churchill?
Yes. Isn't it a blast? Isn't it just a hoot?
It is.
I lived in Japan for a few years, and when you dream in a foreign language, it's astonishing. You wake up with your eyes wide open and realize I just dreamed in another language.
Yeah, my brain's so powerful than I realized.
To a certain extent, dreaming as Winston Churchill, I not only dream that I'm Winston Churchill, I try to bring him into my consciousness. I have a workshop in my mind that I utilize. That's a whole other subject we could talk about at some point in time. But Winston is one of my advisors in my little cubbyhole that I call my brain. I don't know if it's the medulla oblongata or where it's at, but I question him when I've got a problem, and believe it or not, he answers me. So
Winston had some very unique rhythms to his life. Have you adopted any of those?
Well, Churchill rose in the morning and did business in bed on a daily basis. His secretaries would come in. He'd dictate. He'd even dictate while he was in the bathtub in the morning, always with a glass of champagne and a cigar. And then, of course, at noon, a glass of beer, a sandwich. In the afternoon, you see the Johnny Walker Red above my head over here. That's what he drank, diluted in the afternoon with water. He said, while I was in India, well, I should say, the water there was unfit to drink. Therefore, we had to add whiskey to it just to make it palatable. By some miracle, I learned to like it. And so he was a man of tradition. And he'd use that. They called it Winston's mouthwash in the afternoon, because you got to understand, he was speaking all day long to his secretary, and she was taking down every word that he said. And they would give him galleys afterwards that they would go through and edit. And that was another part of his routine. Well, in the afternoon, he'd take a nap, about an hour, and he'd arise and have cocktails and champagne, flights of wine, brandy and cigars afterwards. And then he'd go to work until 2:00 in the morning with his secretary while everybody else conked out. I tried living like that for about 2 weeks. It almost killed me. and in answer to your question. But there are certain things that you as far as Churchill's concerned, I do have an affinity towards a good cigar, and I try to limit myself to 1 or 2 a week. I've got a group of friends that enjoy cigars as well, and there's nothing like having an hour of wonderful conversation with somebody while you're smoking a cigar, and preferably with an adult beverage alongside of you. So that comes along with it, but never to the excess that it seems that Churchill smoked 8 cigars a day, and he was known for his ability to hold alcohol. He was quite an interesting creature. Never, I don't think, ever to be replicated. So, hope that answers your question.
Can you speak to, and I know that we've talked about this in person, but to Winston Churchill's preparation? And I think I just remember one story he told me about a funny rebuttal he had to someone in Parliament, but that funny rebuttal was planned. Like, he prepared that could occur. Can you talk about the preparation of Winston Churchill?
Well, it starts. There's a place, Cambridge University, has a Churchill College that was dedicated to Churchill's name, even while he was still alive. Very unusual. They built it to house his papers, along with the papers of the other prime ministers who had preceded him and after him as well. And it's quite a place. And I had an opportunity to hold Churchill's papers in my hands, the copies of his speeches, for instance. And I was astonished to look in the margins to where he would write in a very small little mechanical pencil rebuttals to possible interruptions that he might receive while he was giving his speech, because they could do that. That's part and parcel of if you've ever watched Parliament in action, the House of Commons, it's really fascinating to watch. I suggest you do it because you can interrupt the person who's speaking. Well, Churchill was speaking once. He was giving a marvelous speech, and a lady asked her, the first female ever elected to Parliament, beautiful blonde lady, austere. She rose and said, "Mr. Churchill, if I were your wife, I should put poison in your tea." Churchill rose meekly and objected. "Lady Nancy, if I were your husband, I would have to drink that tea." he that's how he operated. He was ready for them, basically, at any given juncture. He prepared speeches, wrote all of his own speeches, many of them in iambic pentameter. Give you an example. "I have nothing to offer." You hear the pause right there. "But blood, toil, tears, and sweat. You ask, what is our policy? I will say it is to wage war on the land, on the sea, and in the air, with all our might, with all the strength that God can give us." You get the idea, to where he was speaking and writing in the same language of the British people, ways that they could understand. He used small words, simple words, blood, toil, tears, and sweat, one syllable, maybe two at the most. He worked very hard at keeping it as simple as he possibly could. George Bernard Shaw once wrote, "I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time." Right? We all know what a task it is to write something that's full of meaning yet is simple, and he had a gift of being able to do that. And the rest, as they say, is history. He is certainly recognized as one of the great orators in history.
What impact do you think his dyslexia and speech challenges contributed to his ability to shorten things?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, he used his lisp, for instance, in his speeches as an accentuation to certain words. "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat." Sweat. He would, and he would emphasize that, and he used it as part of his lexicon, if you will.
A trademark, of course.
Very much so. Very much so. Like a cigar, like this. He had a real sense of being a good marketer. But what he did was he took those things that were possibly impediments in his own life and turned them into things that would bring his message forward. He had a phrase. He said, "The pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, but the optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty." And so he had many opportunities for difficulty. He had a lot of different barricades or obstacles that he had to overcome in his life. And he did it with panache, and he did it with the eye of somebody who just turned difficulty into opportunity.
For someone to take what's a natural liability, call it a learning disability, a speech impediment of some sort, and make it neutral, that's a success. To just take away the negative and make it not hurt me. But that kind of person who can take a negative, move it to a neutral, and then transfer it to a positive of their own physical person, I would think that kind of person can look at any situation, relational, political, environmental, otherwise, and say, okay, you see it as a negative. I can make it not only a neutral, but a positive. And that ability to transfer every negative to a positive, that's what I see in leaders like that.
I just watched again a movie last night, the Imitation Game. I don't know if either of you have
Heard
seen
of
that movie. You've seen that one, Todd. It's about the breaking of the Enigma machine, the code, the German code,
Hmm.
and it centers around the man who did that. But it speaks to Churchill's ability to see the efficacy of somebody who was passionate about what they were doing. This gentleman who uh, went ahead and built the first computer to break the German Enigma code. It was a huge machine that he built. I've seen it. I've been to the place that he built it, and that machine is still there. There's a replica of it in Mountain, California, as well. Um, but Churchill funded that with £100,000 plus. He needed more money, and he wrote a letter to Churchill, and Churchill approved it. Uh, and so when you see something that maybe others say it can't be done, Churchill found those people and recognized and saw in those folks um, uh, the potential for greatness. And that machine saved millions of lives during World War II because the Allies were then able to intercept German messages, and they knew about troop movements and ship movements and were able to respond in kind, um, and and really help land in Normandy and different places on the globe, find weaknesses in the German defenses. It was an astonishing concept, and it spoke to what Churchill was all about. Was he recognized that innovation was necessary, and he'd be the one to spot it and hopefully fund it. He had the ability as the prime minister, of course, to fund these things. So there you are.
So, Winston Churchill has something in common with Abraham Lincoln, um, and possibly multiple things in common. But anyway, one of the main things, or at least the things that have been brought to my attention, is that they both built a cabinet that ultimately is named like a team of rivals, right? Like people that were opposed to them or some of their ideas, and had used that to the success of the country. How important, which there's a book about that, about Abraham Lincoln, called Team of Rivals, which is fascinating. But how important was that for Churchill in the country of England at that time? And maybe speak to that, and also just both of their ability to be magnanimous.
Hmm. Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote that book, by the way. It's a great book. And it's almost as if Churchill had read that book. And to a certain extent, of course, he knew his history. He was
Right.
one of what many people don't know about Churchill was he was one of the great students of the American Civil War, and certainly of Abraham Lincoln as well. And as you alluded to, when Churchill became prime minister in May of 1940, he chose his team of rivals, those who had naysayed him the worst throughout the 1930s, who had vilified him and caused him to not be published in newspapers and magazines because of what he was saying about the Nazis and the buildup specifically. There were other items that people didn't like about Churchill, but that was the main thing. Of course, no one wanted another war. Churchill didn't, nobody did. But the fact of the matter was, it was the truth. It was there, and it needed to be said. Well, these individuals, then Churchill noted, were leaders in their own right. Even Neville Chamberlain, who had naysayed him possibly the worst, and who he replaced as prime minister, was brought in as Lord Privy Council, one of the key elements of his war cabinet. There were several others as well, who Churchill said later on, perhaps I chose too well, as they fed back to him their anger and disagreement. But it was Churchill's ability to really reach out to the people from his position as prime minister with his great speeches. We shall fight them on the beaches. We shall fight them on the landing grounds. Those types of words helped the British people remember who they were and how important it was that liberty and freedom be pursued and defended. And I wrote a new play called Defending Liberty, which takes tyranny and liberty through the eyes of Winston Churchill from throughout the ages and brings it forward to today. And now we're living not just in the Iron Curtain age, but I would say the digital Iron Curtain age. It's morphed into that. And so I think if Churchill were alive today, he would be warning us about how important it is to recognize we need to know the truth. It's a very elusive element in these days. You get one of these things, these cell phones, and all three of us could ask the same question and get three different answers. And they would both be true, but they'd be true to you, Todd, they'd be true to you, Ben, and true to me. What we need to do is find out today what the real truth is, and not what some machine thinks it is.
All right, moral relativism. What would you say about just the idea, especially in times like now, of being magnanimous? And even, what does that word mean?
It means never holding a grudge. Churchill was astute. He realized that he was going to be attacked, and he had been attacked all of his life. And he believed that it took too much energy, Ben, to hold a grudge against somebody, to the point to where if somebody would write an article about him in the 1930s, castigating him for whatever, there was one instance that I've read about where he found the man who wrote the article at his club reading his newspaper. And he lowered his newspaper and realized Churchill was sitting right across from him and wondering if he was going to get slugged or whatever. And Churchill simply said, Robert, you didn't really mean to say all those things about me, did you? Let's have a pint and talk about it, shall we? So he was excellent at diffusing situations with a magnanimous spirit. He was willing to forgive. That's another aspect of being magnanimous as well. It's not going to be, when we look back in time as we age, when you look back and you say, hey, I won that argument, I remember that. That's not what makes the difference. It's how you were magnanimous, how you forgave each other, and really got down to the business of relating to each other, and in the process, getting something done. Churchill was
that's just such a skill of being magnanimous while also being a champion for truth. You talked about it never being repeated, and I think that equation, that is the difficult equation to carry, right? Is those couple things together, and probably some other characteristics as well. As you look at, the last 5 years and even going forward, you're speaking to, a new generation of sorts. And we talked about this a little bit. I'm on the older end of being a millennial. I know that you recently spoke at Ball State, so some college age folks. Um, what does the next generation need to remember or know about Winston Churchill?
Well, the next generation simply needs to study history. A young man walked up to Winston in his later years and asked the same question. And Churchill said this: study history, study history, study history, for in history lies all the secrets of statecraft. And what is statecraft? It's the ability to communicate with those who may not agree with you, and simply understanding what has occurred before, and being able to put today's problems against that fabric of what happened in the past. We could avoid so many conflicts in today's age and in the future. So that's what Churchill would simply say, that the study of history is exceptionally important. And of course, many have said in our school systems today, history is not emphasized as much as it possibly was in the past. And I would tend to agree with that. And so I try to take every opportunity to meet with young audiences. I know we've talked about in passing, next time I get back to Indianapolis, finding a school or two or three that Winston could visit.
Yep.
When I get in front of a group of students, I ask one simple question: have you ever told the truth and had no one believe you? That starts the conversation, because Churchill had 10 years of people not believing him. He knew what the truth was. He could see it happening. He had the facts underneath it. But it wasn't really until Hitler invaded Western Europe that people woke up. And we want to try to avoid those things that happened in the past. And that's where Churchill needs to be, and the concept and the idea of not necessarily Winston Churchill, but the study of history would be at the forefront.
What is your favorite Churchill story to share? Do you have one?
You know, yeah, I do. He was in his in the nursery. He was a very young boy, and he had 1,500 toy soldiers, little, lead soldiers. We've all seen pictures of them, and he had them arrayed in battle formation, in a battle that took place in 1704. It was called the Battle of Blenheim. And his great ancestor, John Churchill, the first Duke of Marlborough, he had organized all of the European countries against Louis XIV, who had invaded all the way to Bavaria. He had cut a swath with his French army and was very much like Adolf Hitler in 1704, wanting to take over all of Europe, had ideas. And John Churchill, his ancestor, was called upon to fight that battle. And Churchill had the battle arrayed, and in both sides. When his father walked into the room, he surveyed, as his father did, the situation, cleared his throat. Churchill looked up, and his father said, "So, Winston, a career in the military?" And not wanting to displease him, I said, "Well, yes, Papa. I'd like that very much." I thought he had seen in me a great general, a man who could command great armies. And so I said, "Yes." "Very well, it's settled then." And my father left the room. Years later, I read his diary of the day. Winston not smart enough to go to university, it said. Perhaps you'll make second lieutenant in the army. That's my favorite story about Winston. Churchill realized that he loved his father dearly. His father wanted nothing but the best for him, but that Winston had disappointed him over the years with his lack of study, with his insistence on being headstrong. And that is what he used, guys, to move forward. Whenever there was adversity, he turned it into a positive. He wrote the most beautiful memoir, biography about his father. I recommend you read it. It's something else. The fact that he was able at a very early age to recognize that you needed to turn a negative into a positive. You needed to be able to overcome. And you needed to do it by forgiving any possible anger, any possible wish of ill toward a person who you might perceive has given you reason to be angry with them. And so you might just say that he killed him with kindness, but he did it with facts and truth. So that's my favorite story.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Well,
and I love the message about forgiveness. Actually, that's something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, of how difficult and rare forgiveness is and the power that's in it. And I'd encourage listeners, something I'm reading right now, or I've been reading over and over and thinking about, is the parable of the unforgiving servant in Matthew 18 in the Bible. Just a powerful, powerful story in relation to, if you are a believer in Jesus and the forgiveness that we've obtained through his sacrifice. The forgiveness of our sins is what is granted, right? Which is the highest order. And if we're forgiven of that, any other forgiveness is so small in comparison. So if we've been forgiven that greatly, how can we not forgive so smallly? Just interesting parable around that concept. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. You mentioned before we hit record that you're looking to write a book.
I am. It's exciting. Some of the stories I've shared with you here today will be part of that. What I'm attempting to do is find parallels in Churchill's life with my own life. And there are many. And Todd, you said it earlier. How do you separate between Randy and Winston? Sometimes it gets a little murky. But it's like what I say to kids when I'm on stage with them. I said, you must find your passion. You pull on a string. You keep pulling on that string. Be passionate about it. And there may be difficulties. String might get stuck once in a while, and you've got to unstick it. But you keep pulling on it, and the most amazing things happen to you in your life. I've met so many wonderful people, both of you guys included. And it's a lifetime of passion is what you need to pursue. And if you keep doing that, and you do it with love, you do it with kindness, you do it with the love of Jesus Christ in your heart, And with him as a guide, you can't go wrong. And Churchill had that.
Well, Randy, thanks for the time today. And just for our audience, I got to meet Randy probably half a year ago at a conference. And it's funny, we got to talk at the social hour and ended up, we talked for, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour. And just such a great time making friendship with Randy at the conference. I got to attend a dinner with Winston, which was phenomenal. And we also, from that, had the fortune to bring Randy. We were fortunate to bring Randy to Indy to speak to our leadership team at Conner Insurance. He spoke at our Christmas lunch and shared a Christmas speech that Winston Churchill gave at the White House. Is that right? The White House?
Right. That's right.
And then he came and had dinner with our family, and got to be quizzed by my mother, who is a World War II buff. But it was truly an enjoyable experience and something that was really special for our company, for our family, and I've appreciated the friendship that we've built, Randy. So if you're an employer, a business leader, I can't recommend Randy's message and with any hire. It's truly an experience. But as we kind of close this episode, we ask 2 questions of our guest. And so I'll ask the first. So, Randy, what is a risk that you have taken? This might be an easy question to answer. What is a risk that you have taken that has changed your life?
Well, it's simply the risk of wanting audiences to believe in the fact that I can become Winston Churchill in front of them and hopefully within them. And they take that message with them, and there might be 1 or 2 wonderful items that they incorporate and never forget.
Randy, I'm going to ask this to both you and of Winston, and you can decide the best way to respond to it, because it really apply to both. What is left yet unfinished that you have the resolve to complete?
Well, of course, this book that I'm working on, if anybody's ever written a book, you know, it's a mountain every day that you put your shackles on and begin to climb. That discovery process of not just how to write a book or what to write about, but it's how do I really put myself alongside of this monument, this unbelievable Renaissance man, Winston Churchill. How can I possibly measure up to him? And that is the challenge that I have currently. But I've got news for you, Todd. I'm going to do it.
I know you will.
Very good. Well, Randy, thanks for joining us. Winston, thanks for joining us. And thanks to our audience for joining us for another episode of Risk and Resolve. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Risk and Resolve. See you next time.